Welcome to the Early Years Insights with me, Cathy Leatherbarrow from Eden. And today I have got Natalie, Head of Operations from Banana Moon, and Laura, Head of Early Years at Banana Moon. So welcome.
Thank you for having us today.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Lots going on at the moment. Yes. Lots. And I think maybe we should start because everybody's on a countdown to the new EYFS.
Yeah, 1st of September.
Yeah, I feel like there's a bit of a countdown going on online. And I don't think there's, personally, if you're a really good setting, there's not that many changes that you need to worry about.
No.
But there are worries and concerns. And I think mainly that's due to the worry that, am I not reading it right? Am I not implementing it right? Am I going to fall foul of something, without realising it? So how have you approached it at Banana Moon? Have you implemented any new changes?
Yeah, I think if you're already a reflective setting and you're already a well-performing setting that does look back at the EYFS regularly and does reflect and implement changes, then you will feel that these changes that are being brought in from September aren't very drastic. And I know for a lot of our network, the changes, although they are new to the EYFS, they're not actually new to us because at Banana Moon we already do most of those things. So, they're not actually new changes for us, really. It's just that they're becoming legislation rather than our policy.
That's it, isn't it? And I think it's just, if you get it into your mindset that it's strengthening, you're setting the regulation, the legislation to empower you to improve and support you. Because it is a supportive tool as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to go too far wrong, are you?
Yeah, and I think with the worry about people have about it not getting it wrong or reading it wrong, I think that if you sit down together in a team and read it together and reflect on it together, you do interpret in different ways. So then you can get to the bottom of it. I mean, that's what we do. We sit together and we're like, I've interpreted it this way, how have you interpreted it? And actually, 9 times out of 10, we come around to the same thing. But just having that open discussion makes you feel more confident with what you're looking at and what you need to do to make changes.
It should be part of your leadership and management
Absolutely
practice anyway, shouldn't it? On a monthly basis about what's going on, what's happened, what can you learn from, how can you improve? And it's just one of those items really on your agenda, isn't it? Your management meetings.
We did what we call a network call for all of the managers in our network. And I went through the EYFS changes and what that might mean for our policy changes or anything we might need to implement. And I was really happy to be able to say there aren't actually many changes. And I think that is because we are all so reflective and being based, we've got nurseries all over the UK, so being based in different locations means that actually we can come together all the time and say, we've had that experience and we can learn from each other to
makes you a lot stronger, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Depends on the strengths of each local authority as well, because they've all got different strengths and weaknesses, haven't they? And you can collectively pull those together.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of different opinions as well that we hear from different local authorities on different practices. And, we have to, again, just keep reflecting on whether we want to implement those changes ourselves in our own structure, an own nursery group, and just keep learning from each other.
Yeah.
I think having nurseries in England, Scotland and Wales as well help because in some times it'll come in statutory in one country but not in another and then it'll follow in suit. And what we found interesting is we always try to be above statutory. Yeah. And what's actually interesting in Wales, they call it national minimum standards. And what because therefore the statutory for them is this is the minimum you have to do for children to be safe.
That you have to do.
And the fact that they call it national minimum standards means that you have to do better than, insinuates you have to do better than that. And I think that's how we all have to look at any statutory guidance.
Absolutely.
This is the minimum we have to do. Yeah. So why not try to be better? Because at the end of the day, children, you're looking after children. Children's lives are so valuable. And we have to be able to do exactly what we need to do to keep them safe, to keep them secure and to keep them happy.
Yeah. A big one that's I'm reading a lot about is recruitment. And obviously there's been quite a few changes to recruitment. But I was just going back on a blog that I'd wrote for Eden about 12, 18 months ago, and it was on safe recruitment.
Okay.
So I pulled that up and I thought, has it deferred much to what I'm writing and suggesting is safe recruitment. And it wasn't, and I think it's just because, it's there though now in black and white, like you've just said, a minimum of what you need to do to ensure people are safe to work with children, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have what we call a safer recruitment checklist, and we did exactly the same thing. We went back through the new guidance, looked at the safer recruitment checklist to say, have we got everything in there? And we've actually still got some things that we do, like Laura says, above what's in that, what's in the requirements now. And that's just because we always take on that feedback from different local authorities or the experiences that the other nurseries have gone through. So when somebody has gone through a recruitment process and perhaps they have come across a bump in the road, we can always sit down and say, okay, why wasn't that spotted, or how can we make sure that doesn't happen for another nursery? But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's about the safety of those children, isn't it? So
and I think one of the more difficult scenarios to keep on top is continual suitability, isn't it? You've gone through that initial safeguarding checklist, are they safe, what's DBS saying, or your references, you're looking at that person and holistically almost, as in a well-fit, their well-being. But sometimes it can be really difficult to continue that ongoing suitability sort of checks, isn't it? Because what makes one person suitable today doesn't mean to say they'll be suitable tomorrow, does it?
Absolutely.
And this is something that we've always been quite reflective on. So for years that now it's been our policy that all staff have to be on the update service. And that's nothing new to us. Everybody has to be on the update service. And they also have to have those checks done every 12 to 16 weeks to make sure that their update service is still there, is still clear. They also have regular supervisions, regular one-to-ones. There's wellbeing checks if they want to put those in place. And then on top of all of that, it's reminding staff constantly about whistleblowing, that if they have any concerns, their responsibility to whistleblow.
And I don't positive culture.
Making it feel not worried to whistleblow.
It's not a huge, weight on your shoulders if you blow that whistle, isn't it? Because, in terms of an individual suitability, sometimes it comes down to a whistleblowing because you are totally reliant on somebody being completely honest about what's going on in their personal life outside of work, aren't they? That may affect, their working, behaviour, pattern, or, suitability to work with children. And, if you can find other ways around not relying on that individual to be upfront, open and honest, you've got to put those measures in place, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a lot of work around that kind of professional questioning element. Yeah. So I think sometimes, especially as a new manager, you do feel that weight on your shoulders a little bit because you do all of a sudden have a lot of responsibility, particularly if you're in the DSL role as well. Yeah. So when you are doing those kind of back to work interviews, what is that questioning like? Are you just doing a bit of a tick box because you think you've got to ask somebody why they were off work, or are you thinking about that wider picture to maybe help that person but also understand, was the reason they were absent from work the reason they said, has there been anything else going on? And like you said, in their personal life, people sometimes don't want to open up and be honest about what's going on because they know the severity of what could happen with their role or their job.
And it's a real skill, isn't it, to be, those, like you say, return to work interviews. There's a real skill for it to come across empathetic, but also understanding, but equally be vigilant.
I like to call it professional curiosity because that's effectively what you're doing, and you do it with your families to make sure your children are safe. So it's about taking that to your staff team as well, and being professionally curious about your team, and encouraging your team to be professionally curious about each other. So if they're noticing there's a change in someone's opinion, doesn't matter how minor that may be. Go and speak to somebody about it. Share that with your DSL. Share that information because it could be really, really important.
We always say that. I always say anyway. It's always my visual that I use for myself. That with safeguarding, you might just hear one tiny piece of information, and to you that might not mean anything. But if you tell somebody else, they might have another piece of that jigsaw.
That holds more
all of a
pieces
sudden,
to that jigsaw.
It's a really clearer picture. and sometimes, like I said, that little bit of information can actually be the golden piece that somebody else needed to put that picture together.
So how have you, taken the steps to ensure that whistleblowing's, a positive step and, something quite natural and positive and supportive rather than being, negative and, weighing a heavy weight on their shoulders?
Yeah, well, it's something we've been approaching quite recently, actually, because it's something that we want to build this positive culture around whistleblowing, that it's not negative. So by trying to do that, it starts with, we do safeguarding audits once a year, and these safeguarding audits are the introduction, towards the start of the year, their introduction of giving scenarios where we discuss them with the staff teams and we say openly, you've seen a staff member do this, what would you do? So you have that, you give them those scenarios in those moments and encourage them as a team to answer them or as an individual. And then we would say, well, but actually this could have happened. So what would you have done with that information? So you make it almost just a conversation that you have. Then we encourage them, that then goes into their team meetings and their staff meetings. And then when we go back out, we'll check up with them and how are you feeling about whistleblowing now? If there has been a case of whistleblowing, it's about congratulating that staff member for bringing it forward and sharing that and saying, by you sharing that information, it may not be saving a child from being at risk because there may not be anything wrong. But the fact that you've shared that is you are saving children because you are bringing that culture of whistleblowing.
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's not negative, as in they automatically think the worst is going to happen. A child's put at risk. Somebody's going to lose the job, and all these negative repercussions, when actually it can be really positive, as in, children are their safety's maintained, and it could be that a staff member can get support that they need with an issue that they've got, that they need, just...
Absolutely.
They just need, that gentle, we're here for you, let's help you,
I think
to
with
change
staff
this.
teams as well, and I know we probably see it in our network, and even me, when I look back at my career, I started as an apprentice, so I've kind of done every level in nursery life, and I look back at those times and think that actually I became really close friends with some of the people I worked with because in nurseries you are with each other for a long time. You've
got to get along.
Yeah,
haven't
absolutely.
You?
And then at the same time, you've got to then remember why you are there. And sometimes I think that friendship element can stop people wanting to say something because they think, oh, I'll lose my friendship, or is it right if I do that? But actually, it's like Laura was saying, it's around that culture of making sure people know that they can report things and they can share things if they do.
Just a reminder of where your loyalty and your loyalty
and that's
is,
the thing.
isn't
If
it?
you don't report it and there's something was to be significant, that's not a guilt anybody wants to live with, because you wouldn't inevitably feel
You'd
guilty.
never put your head on
so
your
you
pillow.
Well, absolutely.
At night,
you would feel
you?
awful. So I think that you're not gonna get in trouble for whistleblowing and it not being needed to not whistleblowing and it causing a big concern. It's the same as reporting to children's services, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're never going to get in trouble for reporting something that maybe didn't need to be reported. It's better. You need to make sure that you are trying your hardest to keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
And whistleblowing is needed to keep people safe.
And that includes some apprentices as well, aren't they? Because some of them are 16 and 17.
Absolutely.
They've still got safeguarding, rights.
It's a lot of
as
responsibility
well,
for an apprentice,
Yeah.
especially new into it and not, still learning about safeguarding and the weight of safeguarding.
Yeah.
It's a lot for somebody to take on their shoulders. So it's about tackling that from day one with them as part of their induction.
Also with them as well, because they'll be under 18, so we have to safeguard them, even though they are an employee, essentially.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They've got safeguarding, under that, they're still under that umbrella themselves, aren't they?
Absolutely.
But they're taking the responsibility of it on as well. It's hard, isn't it?
Really hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's a really hard sector.
Well, yeah. So what's your thoughts on CCTV? Do you have it in your settings, and how does that fit into safeguarding?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have CCTV in all of Banana Moon nurseries, and it's actually one part of our USP for our kind of the safety element of the nurseries is that every one of the nurseries has CCTV in all of the rooms, and we also have a biometric fingerprint entry system. So only people that are registered on the biometric system can come into the nursery. So I have worked in nurseries that haven't had CCTV, and when I moved over to Banana Moon and found that they did have CCTV in all of the nurseries, at first I wasn't sure how to feel about it, if I'm honest, but now I can't imagine not having CCTV. I look back on the times when I was a manager and potentially how I would have handled certain safeguarding cases or any kind of whistleblowing that did come through to me, and the way that I would handle those now is completely differently, because I know that the team and the nurseries have that CCTV there to help protect them and to help the safety of the children. So there's kind of two elements to the CCTV, isn't there?
There is. And it's that, you know, we have processes in place to make sure that the CCTV is only accessed by the appropriate people as well. You know, it's
all ICO registered.
Is it one that parents can dial into?
No, so parents can't dial into it. Because we wouldn't then have control over how parents were sharing that.
Absolutely.
So the decision was made not to open it up to families, but it's there to help us with any investigations that we may need to have, and it is a very useful tool. Obviously, there's privacy, so we don't have it in certain areas, so it's not in changing rooms or toilets and so on. But it is in. We make sure there's no blind spots in any of the learning environments. So children are on CCTV at all times, so we can see, for instance, you know, if a child has a bad fall, we can see how that's gone. So again, it helps us with our risk assessment. So when we're doing our tallies on our risk assessments to see our accident tallies to see how accidents have happened, it's an extra checking point to make sure that those safety measures are put into place, and any changes, you know, is there a carpet that's turning up at the corner that's has caused accidents? So there's those extra things that you can see.
Fluke of an accident.
Absolutely. And, you know, we work with children, that happens, doesn't
There's
it? You know,
toy cars and everything.
Yeah, there's always going to be something, but it does help to, like Laura says, to review that risk and say, how can we stop that happening again? You know, what happened on those moments as that leading up to that accident? But, you know, it does also provide safety in terms of that safeguarding element too. You know, the staff are on CCTV, and, you know, we hope that we would never need to use it for that reason, but it's there.
Yeah. And we have had lots of staff who say that they feel more confident because they've got CCTV, because if there's an accusation against them, if there ever was an accusation against them, they'd be like, well, I'm on CCTV, you can see I haven't done that. Or so it gives them that level of security that they are being watched, which feels odd because none of us like the idea of being watched.
You do.
But it gives you that security to know that you are in a, you know, you're safe in where you are and what you're doing.
You do quickly forget as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
you don't.
sure.
It doesn't take long to adjust to being on camera, so you do quickly forget that they are there.
I presume
and it
it's not
becomes part.
monitored all the you know, there's not somebody sat there monitoring it.
So we don't use it for observations of staff or anything like that. So if a manager wants to do an observation of a staff member, that has to be done in the room, and that's our policies. They go into the room to do those observations, but it helps with, you know, seeing. If a parent they do have a screen in the office. So if a parent rings and says, I'd like to speak to so-and-so key person, they can have a look to see where they are, and that might happen. But on a whole, it can be accessed, but it's only really accessed if they need to do an investigation, or there's been a serious accident or anything like that, and then they can download the image, they can download that data to save it with that investigation or that accident
I think
record.
in terms of kind of historical safeguarding cases, there have been some cases recently in the news where actually CCTV has been a really key element in identifying further abuse or confirming accusations that have been made.
One that pops into my mind about sleeping,
Absolutely.
particularly. I think that's, you know, the most recent one, isn't it? And the most one that's got the media headlines the most as well.
Yeah,
at the
absolutely.
moment.
And that unfortunately that, you know, it was a horrendous case, and it's one that we hope you know isn't ever repeated in early years. You know, that's not why any of us go into the industry. Certainly not for us anyway. And I think having that CCTV there, although it was an awful case to have to review, it was a key player in helping make sure
absolutely.
that child received the justice that they needed to receive, or the
Absolutely.
family members, they had a real understanding there of what happened. And I think without that CCTV, you wouldn't have ever got to the bottom of that, really.
No, and it's, for me especially, it flagged up lots of questions about safe sleeping practices, never mind, what happened to that poor little girl. But, is it appropriate for a young child to be sleeping on a beanbag?
Well,
No.
I think
Is it appropriate for a child to be on a beanbag that doesn't have the core strength to be on a beanbag?
It's just...
It's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think there was lots of little elements to that small snippet of CCT that we got to see in the media that rose a lot of red flags for a lot of people, as well as the horrific, outcome that happened.
I think
as
there's
well.
also around kind of that safer sleep element. There's a lot of things that have changed, and
of course.
the more and more research that we get, and the more kind of safety awareness that and information that we're given, the more that, again, it goes back to that reflection, but the more that we can reflect on our practices.
Absolutely.
And I know that kind of previously or in other countries, things like children sleeping in pushchairs is something that is really well recommended, and sleeping outdoors in pushchairs. I have a particular love for children sleeping outdoors, but I know that in terms of our policies and procedures is that we don't allow children to sleep in anything where they're restricted or where they're tied into something or in a harness, as an example. So I think situations like that just continue to help us reflect on what should be in our policies and how have things moved forwards,
and
because
it's
it changes so much.
And it's keeping in, like you say, up to date with research as well, isn't it? To maintain that quality and consistency, and that, and not resting on your laurels, you have to put in the time to research these things yourselves, don't you? Because, with sleep there, if you look at sleep around the world, obviously in the UK we recommend, children on their backs. With a lot of countries around the world, it's on their tummies. And it's, it's the research behind each method.
And it's also, if you look in different
practice.
countries, to what they would recommend children sleeping
Absolutely.
changes.
Yeah.
So something we do is when we're setting up a new nursery, we will make sure that the equipment we're using meets what the government guidance is in England, because it could be that this cot or sleep mat is made in a different country, but it's so the age range may be that over there in that country it may be suitable from 6 months, whereas in here in England it may say not suitable until 12 months. So it's that the equipment you're using, it comes down to those sorts of things, and we do that. So it's something that we check on our visits to the nurseries, checking what children are sleeping on, the distance that they're separated, are children top and tail, all of those things that go with it. These are all big checks that we make sure are done to, again, support the nurseries to make sure that they've considered everything. And things like a beanbag, I mean, I wouldn't put a beanbag in a baby room anyway, because of the risks. Children just don't have that core strength at that point to have that.
Absolutely not.
Especially not putting them to sleep on it. So we have to be careful with what equipment we put in, and it's something we all need to be responsible for and take time to get to know every item we have in our nursery. Yeah.
We have a sleep section as part of our induction for staff as well, don't we? So as staff members are being inducted, they won't actually put a child to sleep unless it's been signed off as part of their induction. And we have the CCTVs actually in our sleep rooms as well. So, the children are always monitored. But we also have a 5-minute sleep check rule. So the children have to be checked physically every 5 minutes for signs of them still being breathing, the blanket's not gone too high above their shoulders.
Not displaying a temperature, that sort of thing.
There's a lot that can happen in a short space of time while a child's
5 minutes
asleep.
is massive in a child's life.
Such a long time. It is such a long time.
A lot can happen in that 5 minutes, can't it? Especially when a child is asleep. Like you say, it only takes a sheet, doesn't it, to ride up, or a wriggler, or
absolutely.
We
have. Like Laura was saying there, when we set up the new nurseries, we have quite specific rules on what blankets have to go for each age range. So all of our babies have cellular blankets, and the older children, it can't go above their shoulders. And it seems really intense and quite a lot of rules just for a child to have a nap. But actually, when you think about the grand scheme of things, it's so important. I think we're quite lucky in a sense of the child development sense that the children, particularly the younger children, have this dedicated sleep spaces. Because I know that not a lot of nurseries do have that. So we are quite lucky to be able to offer that space for children to have an uninterrupted nap, but also the kind of safety element is still there
that
too.
can be tough, can't it? Because if your napping space is in your quiet corner of your
Absolutely.
nursery room, it's
absolutely.
a hard one to manage,
especially with the
isn't
kind
it?
of brain development side of things, where we get a little bit nerdier at Banana Moon. But
I love nerdy brain development. That's fine.
But that's in terms of kind of what children need and the importance of that sleep as well. It's not just about it is about the safety, but sleep is really important for those children too. So having that dedicated sleep space is a key part for us.
So how do you bring in parents' wishes and desires then into that as well?
Can be a tough one, I think, can't it?
Because it can be really tough, can't it? Because if a parent is really adamant that their child will only sleep in a particular way or in a particular thing, and they would like to maintain that
for 30 minutes.
Yeah. Only wake them up on the dot, regardless.
Yeah.
It's
about educating the parents and families, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. From day one, you show them around the nursery, you explain your sleep room, and as you show them and explain the sleep room, at that point you explain that we have to follow our own policy on safe sleep, which is following Lullaby Trust and government guidance to make sure that children are kept safe at sleep time, and also that we do not have sleep limits. So we were unable to wake a sleeping child. So you explain it from day one, and then it's up to parents to make that choice whether it's the nursery for them or not. But explain to them why we don't wake sleeping children.
It's about educating them as well, isn't it? Because let's face it, no parent, gets handed a guidebook, do they? When they, a baby comes into the world, it's hard going, isn't it?
And lots
to
of
learn
parents
along the
now are
way.
reaching out to sleep therapists and asking for support and guidance. I'm seeing a big increase in sleep therapists being accessed. And, again, it's about sleep therapists may offer different advice to what we would offer. So, again, it's managing that.
Yeah.
So if you have had families that have paid for that service, because it's a paid for service and it's it's quite an official title, isn't it, sleep therapist? So if it differs from our opinion, it's being able to confidently explain why our stance is that.
Absolutely.
I think part of that explanation or education for families as well is not being afraid to say that although we offer this home from home feeling that a lot of nurseries kind of aim for, is that actually that child isn't at home. That a nursery, as much as we want them to be family friendly, lovely spaces, we do have policies and procedures we have to adhere to. We do have duties of care, and as much as we want to make sure that that child is as settled as possible, we can't always follow the child's routine exactly at home, because we do have that duty of care and that element around making sure that our procedures are embedded properly.
It's a hard one to manage sometimes, isn't it?
It's tricky.
But from very, very first settling in session or show round even, if you set those standards from then, and parents will buy into those standards if they understand why you're doing it.
And I think around sleep though, sometimes it's just if they are that exhausted.
Of course.
Because they've got a child who is not sleeping well at night, but, there's reasons, isn't there, why a child isn't sleeping well.
And helping them unpick it, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the worry, because lots of the time when they're using a nursery is because they're working. They're going to work. They're not going to be performing their best if they're absolutely exhausted because they're not sleeping at night. So I totally understand why for parents sleep is so important. I absolutely get that need for it to be, to get it right and for it to work for them as a family. But I don't think a sleep limit necessarily is the answer.
Well, no.
Because I think there are other ways of doing that and getting that routine that works for that family. It's just finding it.
Yeah,
and once you get it, you can.
Because good sleep promotes better sleep, doesn't it? So...
I mean, I'm passionate about baby-led sleep. So I myself, with my son, we did baby-led sleep. So I had no nap times scheduled. It was all based on him. And actually, he came into a beautiful sleep routine naturally, very early on, because I was very lucky that we went through it and I didn't feel that pressure of trying to get into a routine. And for us, it worked really, really well.
Yeah.
So, some families will take that method of baby-led sleep, others take different methods. Yeah. And it is up to the individual families to find that method that works for them. But I think as professionals, we can help them find what works for their family, so they can still get that good night's sleep, but babies aren't necessarily having to be woken up in the middle of a sleep cycle.
It's so important for the whole family.
Of course
isn't
it is.
And then if you've got a sleep therapist, giving you a very large bill with all the answers, parents will grab that.
Of course they will, because it's neat, because they're desperate for that answer.
People are busy.
Yeah.
People are trying to juggle so many different things, and then if you've got somebody there that claims to have the answers, then people will, they will look for that.
Grab it with two hands.
Obviously, some sleep therapists will have the answers. They'll be able to absolutely guide you through that process perfectly. So I can absolutely see that it would be a very attractive offer for lots of families. But equally, we now recognise how important sleep is to our bodies, that we are more likely to get ill of cancer if we don't have enough sleep.
Yeah.
There's science out there to show all of that.
Absolutely.
So we are now seeing how valuable sleep is to our not only just our mental well-being, our physical well-being.
Absolutely.
And so we've got to get it right. So
Well,
I totally see it.
Because whether you're a child or an adult, if you're ill, you best
Your
recover.
body needs to rest.
You best recover when you're asleep.
Of course.
So if you sleep, well and deeply and uninterrupted, then you are going to recover quicker, and have a healthier life, aren't you? And obviously, we all know about brain development for little ones when they're asleep it's huge.
And that's why we have the
huge.
policy where we won't wake a sleeping child. We can do all the kind of usual things if they are in a main sleep space, or we can open the blinds and we can see if any natural noises wake the child. But if the natural noise doesn't wake them, then we will leave them to sleep because they need to sleep.
Alan Kennedy on our Child's Developing Mind course, he touches on sleep as well, and the sleep cycles and patterns, and where your delta waves are, at different,
interesting.
And on the, I think he said it goes into 90-minute circle, circles of, so you don't want to wake up really before your 90 minutes is up, and I'm thinking, gosh, but if you think, and then you think, well, you've got a child who, a parent is adamant, it's 30 minutes, or, they won't go to sleep at night. You're disrupting that brain development.
Absolutely.
That healthy approach.
I think if you think of ourselves, if you naturally wake up before your alarm goes off, how much more awake you feel, if that's that natural, and how much in a better mood you are that day than if your alarm wakes you up. Because straight away you're like, oh, it's time to get up.
You disorder.
One more time.
I have two
I'm a
alarms
serial
every morning.
snoozer.
But you're not ready to get up, are you? I know, because I found after I think I've done that Child's Developing Mind course a few times. I'm just fascinated by it, and I learn something new every time I go on it, even though it's the same course. But when I was speaking to Alan, he said, well, and he was talking about the 90 minutes. He said, so if you want to get up at 7, you need to work backwards in 90-minute slots. So you're more well rested. You're not interrupted. Your delta waves are, and I'm thinking, gosh, so I was really nerdy.
It's really interesting.
Bedtime is it's scheduled on my get up time.
But I bet you feel a lot better for it.
It does. It works. It really
I think
works.
that's also probably an important thing to consider when going back to apprentices as well, because if you have got those 16 and 17-year-olds and their alarm clock is going off at 6 a.m, 6:30 a.m, if they've got a 7:30 shift, for them, that sleep being disrupted can also still be really important in them as young adults.
But also the brain development of teens and late teens.
Yeah, they need a lot more sleep.
But also it's very different. They're at their most active when we're going to bed.
Absolutely.
They can't naturally, through their brain development, go to sleep as like you and I would.
I had an apprentice once who, when she came to me when I was a manager, and we were talking about her working patterns and her college work being behind, which I'm sure many managers have had those conversations with their apprentices. And I said, why is it? Let's really unpick that. And she said to me, well, I just can't get out of bed on a morning for when you want me to be here. So then I'm in a bad mood until lunchtime.
So it's your fault.
And I said, okay, how would you feel about me moving you to the later start time, and I will never put you on the first shift? And she said, Natalie, if you can do that, I'll stay here. And she said, and I'll stay in this nursery forever. And the whole time I was manager there, she stayed, she qualified, she stayed at the nursery, and she just preferred the later shift. Yeah. And I think having that open conversation with her and helping her to understand that actually I can make an adjustment for her.
And
Actually, not many of my other staff wanted to do the late shift, so it worked really well for me.
Well, that's it, isn't it? The older you get, you're up earlier, aren't you? So you want the early shift, so you've got the rest of the day.
Absolutely. But she much preferred the later shift, and I said that's absolutely fine. We can do that for you, and actually it helps us as the nursery as well. Yeah. So, she was brilliant. She got back on track with her college work. She was getting more sleep, and it was just a lovely way of kind of showing that. Having those conversations and just being reflective of their stage of development, even though they're not a small child, they're not technically an adult yet either.
No, they're still going through a lot of brain development themselves, aren't they, in the shifts.
And I think this comes back to earlier when we talk about the return to works, because I used to find those, certain staff members, if it was they were on the early shift on a Monday morning, I could guarantee they were going to call in.
They weren't going to be in.
So it would and again, having those return to works gave you the opportunity to have that conversation with the staff. Yeah. And at the end, yes, we've all got businesses to run, and nurseries are businesses, and you have got to make sure you're meeting your ratios and everybody's happy and safe. But you do have to be flexible with your staff. Now, the recruitment is not where it was, and if you can make your staff happy at work by having a slight change in their hours, to get them to work more regularly and to get them to be happy at work, that's what you need to do.
Well, happy staff equals happy children.
100%.
Absolutely. And I think it's that, we keep coming back to this. We were having lunch yesterday talking about Gen Z. And I think this, I think it was kind of an office table discussion, wasn't it, about how we are having to adapt, and that the next generation don't want to work in perhaps the same way that we were used to, or when I was an apprentice, in all honesty, my mum and dad, you are out that door and you go to work. It was kind of instilled into me from the moment I started work. But people's mindsets are changing now. People's well-being is important,
and I think they're very aware of that as well, because I was in a hospital waiting room yesterday with my youngest. And she said to me, no, it was only a checkup, it's fine. And she said to me, were you a gentle parent or were you a harsh parent? I went, oh. I said, well, I parented you and still am. Am I a gentle parent
You tell me.
Or a harsh parent? And she said, I think you're in the middle. I said, why are you asking? And she, as a 15-year-old, was observing parenting within the hospital waiting room and going, she's going to get nowhere with that child with the, oh, come and sit next to me. And I was thinking, and then she said, look at that one over there. Sit there, shut up, don't move till we're called. And she
sounds like you're creating an future
earlier. There's an EYP in the pipeline.
Not that, you've been brought up in this, and she was going, I said, well, what's your thought on it? I said, well, do you want to be a gentle parent or a harsh, as she labelled it, a harsh parent? And she said, I don't think either works, Mum. And I went, probably right there. And she went, so how would you have tackled that? And I went, we wouldn't have got there in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
So I think when Gen Z, they're more aware. I think as what I was.
I think more in tune to their emotions.
Exactly, because I would never have picked up on, children's behaviour and their parents' management of that.
Absolutely.
Within a waiting room. I think, gosh, this next generation, they view the world very differently and how they fit into it, their responsibilities, and that, and that impacts the workforce quite dramatically, doesn't it?
It really does.
On how they're going to, enter the workforce and a career, and how it's managed.
Yeah, and I think with every generation, we learn more. And we become better people through learning from each generation, and I think that that's commendable to have to be observing that. It shows that you've got a very observant,
emotionally intelligent 15-year-old.
Yeah, very emotionally intelligent.
But it's that. So then, as a manager, you've got to reflect on that, haven't you?
Yeah.
And and make your your management approach different. So
And I think just down to we were talking about telling the time, weren't we?
Oh,
we were saying that younger people now are obviously telling the time more on their phone or smartwatches. Yeah. So it'll be 24-hour clocks. So when you show them I think it's 1 in 10 they say now can't read a clock face. Yeah. So if your clock is a clock face in your staff room and they're late back from lunch, change the clock.
But who's responsible for
change the
that?
clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about reflecting on what they need in the workplace and how they come to work, because I think for a lot of people, the workspace is set up for just perhaps how we've always had it, or it's just always been that way.
It's not
or
evolved.
It's the process we've always done.
Yeah.
Well, could we change something? Is there a way to make that a little bit more accommodating for the next generation that's coming through? Because they're challenging our thinking on so many ways. And sometimes I think we try and say, well, no, this is the way we do it. But actually, could we change things a little bit more, and could we adapt?
Doesn't mean to say it's got to continue.
Yeah.
I mean,
just
if a
because
child
it's
was
always
struggling
been
in the
that way.
nursery, you would change the environment, not the child.
Absolutely.
So why don't we do the same for our staff teams?
Yeah.
So it's just taking it to our whole staff team. It's that whole thing. If the flower's not growing, then you change its environment, don't you? And that's the same for our children and our staff.
Yeah. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Some great discussions there. And I hope to see you again soon on another one.
That's great. Thanks very much for having us.
Yes, thank you. It's been lovely.